So, good morning, everybody. This is a wonderful latest forum session featuring Unitarian Church of Charleston authors. And before we start, I do want to pay tribute to Joanne Simpson, who was the originator of this series. We've had a number of these sessions where congregation members have presented on their work. And as you know, Joanne moved away to Tennessee and then very sadly died. So we have lost Joanne Simpson, who's the kind of motivator for this particular session. But we have four authors today. I'm going to ask Priscilla to actually do the formal introductions for each of those. We'll do everybody all at once and then have the Q&A at the end. But Priscilla, I'll pass it over to you. Unmute, please.
All right, well, good morning and thanks everyone for taking an extra hour out of your morning. I first want to give tribute to Simon, who I found out this morning has been doing these forums, organizing them for 10 years. So Simon, unbelievable the work that you do for us. It's just amazing. So thank you so much. So this morning we're going to hear from four of us who have recently published books. And the way that it will work is we're going alphabetically. So Lisa Lindahl will start, then Donna Prescott, then myself, and then Tobias, then Buren. We each will take about 8 minutes to talk about our book and do a reading. So if you have questions for the individual authors, you can put them in the chat box so you don't forget them. And then at the end, after we're all done with our readings, then we'll do the Q&A session and I'll look through the chat box, pull up questions, and or you can just raise your hand and we will unmute you. So that's the way that we will run this. So I'm going to turn it over first to Lisa Lindahl.
Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you. So I wrote a book called Unleash the Girls, the untold story of the invention of the sports bra and how it changed the world and me. And many people think of this as a business memoir, and really it's a lot more than that. It's a tale of overcoming and becoming, especially as it relates to women of a certain era. So I'm reading from a chapter. I'm not telling the basic story of how the invention happened and the success of the business. Instead, I'm going a layer deeper, and I'm reading from a chapter called Heroines. Though, before I start reading, you should know that the other character in this reading is Hinda, who was my business partner in this endeavor. On the one hand, while both Hinda and I were committed to our own personal growth, our interaction in the office was civil at its best and disgraceful at its worst. Perhaps this was distressing to me because the fundamental relationships of my childhood were also troubled, far from idyllic. So when Hinda, my business partner, routinely yelled at me in the office during those first years, I would be triggered and withdraw or respond with snarky sarcasm, sometimes both. Too many of our discussions devolved into arguments, turning the energy in the room darkly electric. And our employees, about 50 at that time, were victims of this tension. It wasn't pretty. It embarrassed me, even then. It was the very opposite of what I believed an enlightened, compassionate, and collaborative partnership should look like, and most definitely the opposite of what I had envisioned when Polly, Hinda, and I started out in my living room. This relationship was the very opposite of the counterculture values we had all professed to embrace: love, cooperation, peace, women for women. But then, on the other hand, we'd sometimes offer in-house yoga classes to our employees. Or we might agree to have a staff training, bringing in a coach or personnel expert to do something that benefited everyone. We were rather like parents trying to make up for bad behavior. I was ashamed of my dysfunctional relationship with Hinda and of her apparent negative feelings towards me. Raised to be a lady in those long ago 1950s, We were supposed to be, us girls, we were supposed to be, above all, proper, liked, accepted. Appearances mattered. And while I understood clearly, as an adult, I understood the inherent superficiality of this directive and its resultant oppression of many a woman, to be on the receiving end of such direct and undisguised negative judgment from Hinda was a brutal, scab-ripping way to confront this conditioning. And it wasn't just about my upbringings and expectations that had been embedded, but also about my more current ones, the values and expectations I had chosen myself as a young woman becoming in the 60s and 70s. My belief and need for the sisterhood mythos, women for women and all that, was being battered by Hinda's aggressive behavior. Oh man, I was struggling. But here's the thing. On a deep level, I concurred. I was responsible for my own situation. Somehow I was complicit in this arrangement, and so I felt shame. I also looked for answers. How had I been complicit in creating this relationship? I remember one day Hinda was standing in the door of my office and we were discussing something, and per usual, not seeing eye to eye. I wish I could recall exactly what the topic of our discussion was, but I don't. What I do remember is saying something along the lines of, "That scares me," or "That's a scary plan." The words were barely out of my mouth when Hinda interrupted, launched herself further into my office, thrust her face into mine and yelled, "Don't use that word, scared. What is there to be frightened of? I hate that word." She went on loudly and angrily deriding me about being afraid, timid. Under my immediate response to her, one of anger and defensiveness, I realized that her words really took me aback. No one had ever called me out about my anxiety and fear before. I was embarrassed. I was a fraidy cat, and she had called me out. After she left, however, something else about the exchange lingered with me. Something else was going on with her, I knew, but what? I had this nagging feeling for a while and then put my finger on it. I recognized the fear in her. She had reacted so strongly because my fear had triggered her own insecurities, and she couldn't have it. Like knows like. We were both struggling with the constant anxiety and stress of dealing with the unknowns of an expanding business. This was a major aha moment for me. We were both young women in changing times, our own and that of the culture in which we were swimming. I was no stranger to uncertainty and fear. Epilepsy had been a good teacher on that front. My constant relationship with the unknown and unpredictable made it easier for me to give my fears a voice. Hinda found that a sign of weakness. And perhaps in some instances, when I allowed the fear to cripple me, it was. She, on the other hand, felt she had to keep up a strong, invincible front, even to herself. This was probably in response to the fear she read in me. She literally couldn't deal with any sign of scared in or from me, as it risked feeding and mirroring her own fears. Until that moment, I hadn't understood this about her. The teaching for me from that moment was strong and twofold. First, it reminded me to see beyond the book's cover. Clearly, I had not been seeing beyond Hinda's brash and brave front. Second, it taught me not to be so fast to reveal my own fears and insecurities to others, especially Hinda. I needed to take a page from my partner's playbook and make a brave show, even when I wasn't feeling it. As Hinda would say, "Fake it till you make it." It was one of her favorite sayings, which until that moment I had always privately disliked. Now, I was going to practice it. It's about becoming and overcoming, and running a business was a tool, a vehicle for that happening. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. On a personal note, I've known Lisa for over 40 years. We were friends in Burlington when she, back in the days when she invented the jog bra. And at the time I had a small boutique shop for men's and women's clothing. And I remember Lisa coming down to the shop and laying out pieces of fabric and asking our opinion, which fabrics did we think women would want for their jog bra? And I said, what the hell is a jog bra? I don't know. So, you know, fast forward 40 some years and here we are together again here in Charleston. So thank you, Lisa.
Oh, you're welcome, Priscilla. Thank you.
All right, so we're on to Donna Prescott. Donna.
Okay, there I am, I think. Okay, I unmuted me, but I'm still seeing Priscilla.
No, we can see and hear you, Donna. We can see and hear you.
Okay,
Go ahead.
all right. In the late 14th century, in London, it was the end of a long, cold winter, and people had been cooped up together with their family and their animals and such. And April came and all they wanted to do was get out. So a group of pilgrims met in London at the Tabard Inn to take a pilgrimage to Canterbury to the shrine of Sir Thomas of Becket. And along the way, they told tales. This is the opening prologue to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. One that April with his sure risota, the draught of marsh had pierced to the rota, unbathed every vein in sweet liquor, of which virtue engendered is the fleur. One zephyr sake with his swayed breath, and spirit hath in every holt and haith. The tendre croppers and the young the sun, hath in the ram his half a coursey run. And small fuellas mocking melody, that slapen all the night with open yea. So pricketh him not her in her courages, then longing folk to go on pilgrimages, and palmeras for to sake and strange strands, to fern howes caught in sundry lands, and specially from every shearer's ond, of Angolan to Canterbury they wand, the holy blissful martyr for to sake, that him had holpen, one that they were sake. Fast forward 700 years about, and we have a group of pilgrims meeting in Chicago at Union Station for a train trip. When August with its heat beyond reason signals the end of the summer season, when children dread the end of vacation, while parents welcome fall's liberation, when summer pastimes begin to wind down, water sports, baseball games, ice cream in town, when squirrels are fat, birds ready to migrate, zucchini run riot, gardens won't wait, when those barefoot days of summer tans fade, beach trips, camping trips, one final time made, when waning sunlight foreshadows the autumn, then folks long to seize one last vacation. Before custody parents reclaim children, when credit cards bear a heavy burden, then sundry folks head for sundry places. In the US, on Memphis, they set their gazes, the rock and roll blissful martyr to seek, to honor him in his alleged death week. And so it befalls that I come to Chicago's Union Station on 14 August, ready to head to Memphis and Graceland with 30 other pilgrims, plus the Graceland pilgrimage director, Teresa Turneau. Teresa arranged the trip from Chicago to Memphis for this annual pilgrimage, commemorating Elvis's alleged death on the 16th of August, 1977, with a coach reserved just for our group. Personally, I believe that the king still lives, but I would rather not make the trip in the colder weather for the birthday celebrations in January. The schedule looks interesting, offering a Mississippi Delta blues tour and a trip to the birthplace in Tupelo. It also includes a variety of optional events involving Elvis impersonators and people, such as actors and musicians who worked with Elvis before he went incognito, or died, as most people choose to believe. I think I will skip the candlelight vigil at the front gate of Graceland tomorrow night, though, since anyone who used to read the weekly world news before the internet put it out of print knows Elvis lives. All right. In Chaucer's work, his Miller plays the group out of town on bagpipes. And so I have created for my group, Rose, the waitress, who plays the ukulele at points during their pilgrimage, their train ride. So with apologies to Steve Goodman, who I hope is looking down and smiling, here we go. We gather in the coach car, everyone. Senator Cloud tells a tale of Vietnam. Rose's tale causes quite a stir. Other pilgrims try to quiet her, and the train continues to calm. And they're off. I'm going to read a little bit from the preface so that you have some idea of what's going on in the book. I intend for the novel to work on two levels. For readers unfamiliar with the Canterbury Tales, I hope that they are able to enjoy or appreciate the group of travelers, the issues which the tales reflect, and the camaraderie or lack thereof among the pilgrims. For readers familiar with the Canterbury Tales, I hope that they are able to appreciate how the issues that touch the lives of Chaucer's medieval group still touch the lives of people in the 21st century, and how the spirit of Chaucer's tales can hold true in today's world. I did not intend to rewrite or completely adapt the Canterbury Tales, but to pull relevant aspects of medieval society forward to today's world. At the end of the novel, the reader will find a key explaining the correlations between my tales and their medieval antecedents. When friends and neighbors heard I was writing a novel, frequently they asked if they were in it, sometimes with hope and sometimes with trepidation. My stock answer was that for a price, I would either put them in or take them out, whichever they preferred. The real answer, however, is that most of these characters have their antecedents in Chaucer's pilgrims. For instance, Chaucer's knight, squire, and yeoman became Senator Pam, Sandra the senator's daughter, and Adam the senator's aide. Even Renee, the transgender woman, has a counterpart in Chaucer's work. In the general prologue, Chaucer, the narrator, says of the pardoner, "I trow he were a gelding or a mare," meaning his gender identity is unclear. Human nature has hardly changed at all in the over 600 years since Chaucer wrote, so it was easy to model my modern day pilgrims on medieval ones. All right, and I'm going to send you off with a piece of one last song. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Thank you.
Well, Donna, you're a tough act to follow, I got to say. That was wonderful.
Thank you. That's try to have fun.
All right. So I'm next, and I wrote a book called Embrace Your Wobbles, Wisdom from the Yoga Mat. And I noticed that on today's Zoom call is Dara Simon. So I'm going to give a shout out to Dara because she actually was the yoga teacher in the class that I was attending about, gosh, it's probably been 18 years ago now. Well, no, not that long ago. I've been practicing yoga for about 18 years. And I was in a class with Dara Simon in Sullivan's Island, and we were all practicing tree pose, which is a balance pose. And for whatever reason, we all were having a hard time staying in it. We kept falling out. And Dara said, it's okay, embrace your wobbles. Just go ahead and laugh about it and come back into the pose. And I thought to myself, embrace your wobbles. I said, I love that expression. I'd never heard it before. And I thought, you know, that could be a nice name for a book. And at the time, I had recently finished another book called Real Women, Real Leaders. And the format of that book was a series of essays by other women in leadership. And I really enjoyed the process of writing a book with other people and editing their essays on a common theme. And I thought 2 years later, I thought, well, you know, let's do this book that I've been thinking about. And so what I did was to reach out to yoga teachers and practitioners of yoga to write essays specifically about wobbles. And I'll explain what that is in a moment. So some of the other essayists, as you may well know, one of them was Reverend Elaine Paraslua, who was our transitional minister a couple of years ago. And another one is Dr. Sundar Balasubramanian. He's a biomedical researcher here at MUSC. He's done 2 different services for us at the Unitarian Church. So it's a real interesting group of people that helped me with this particular book. So I want to start by giving you just an overview of what the book is all about. The purpose of this book is to help readers understand that wobbles, referring to as physical and mental challenges, are unavoidable part of yoga practice and of life itself. The book asks readers to think about the types of wobbles that they experience in life, both on and off the yoga mat. The book invites readers to consider how they view these wobbles, including the inner dialogue that they use when experiencing a wobble, because this often provides insight into how we perceive wobbles. Perceptions as to whether wobbles are good, bad, or neutral partly determines our response to those challenges. Finally, this book challenges readers to become more aware of their habitual and often unconscious approach to managing these wobbles, both on and off the yoga mat. And I want to point out here that even if you're not a yoga practitioner, the book offers lots of insights into how we perceive mental and physical challenges and emotional challenges in our lives. So the format of the book is a series of essays in which experienced yoga teachers and practitioners provide their perspectives on wobbles, both in their yoga practice and in their lives. While each essay offers a slightly different perspective on the concept of wobbles, the common theme across all of these essays is that wobbles are an integral part of our lives. And it is in noticing these wobbles, not judging them, that we continue to learn and grow. Thus, wobbles are not just unavoidable, but they are essential to our growth. So then I'm going to read to you from one of my essays that I wrote, which I chose because many of us in the Unitarian Church are of a certain age or moving towards that. This one is called Balance, Memory, and Eagle Pose. And I begin each essay with a quote from a different yogi. This one comes from Rodney Yee. And his quote is, "The success of yoga does not lie in the ability to perform postures, but in how it positively changes the way we live our lives and our relationships." It is inevitable that as we age, we will wobble more, and at the same time, we will be more aware of the fact that we no longer have the strength, flexibility, or the resiliency of our youth. But as Mary Stewart so aptly states in her book, Yoga Over 50, quote, "The aging process cannot be halted, But we do have a choice whether to conserve our health and make the most of our potential or fritter away our energies. Yoga is about the first of these choices. So by practicing yoga, we are paying attention to our health, physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental. Yoga helps us to maintain our flexibility, our strength, and our resiliency. So as we practice postures that stress our balance system, our balance improves. It improves our working memory for other important issues. So what is working memory and why should we care about it as we age? Working memory temporarily stores information that is relevant to any task that we are currently doing. For example, you're wondering where you put your car keys or what was on the grocery list that you left at home on the kitchen counter. That is what working memory does for us. It is the immediate skill that allows us to remember and to use relevant information while we are in the middle of an activity. These wobbles of the working memory may be decreased by improving our balance, not just in the yoga practice, but other balance activities we can do in our lives. In fact, a recent article from 2018 states, quote, "Working memory has a severely limited capacity. Humans can maintain only 3 to 4 objects at once," end quote. In other words, although one can hold anything in our mind, we can only hold a few of them at a time. Therefore, as balance declines with our age, more of our working memory becomes devoted to balance control, specifically figuring out where our body is in space so we don't fall. We rely on our attention to balance and our position in space to keep us safe, thus limiting the capacity of our working memory. One common source of falls as we age is trying to do 2 things at once. We can maintain our balance or we can talk to a friend on the phone, but it is harder to do both without risking a fall. Therefore, knowing where our body is in space frees up our working memory to help pay attention to our daily tasks. So, noticing but not judging where we are in space, what our balance is all about, not being judgmental about it, is the key to embracing wobbles in our lives, both on and off the mat. In another essay that I write, I talk about the 2 different voices in our heads when we are struggling. One is the voice of our grandmother who says, "Oh, don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. Sit down and have a cup of tea. Don't push yourself too hard. You don't want to hurt yourself." And the other voice that we often say is, "I got to push harder. I got to work through this. If I work harder, I'll be stronger." And that's where sometimes we can hurt ourselves, both in yoga and in our daily lives. So pay attention, which voice is speaking to you, which one is forcing you to make a judgment that perhaps is not right for you in that moment. Embrace your wobbles. It's part of life. Thanks. All right, so we are on to Tobias. Yay, we can see you now, Tobias.
Can you hear me? Hello? Uh-oh.
Yes, we can hear you, Tobias. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks, Priscilla. I do that a lot, you know, one thing at a time, especially going downstairs, right? So this is my book. Let's see. Got some, 7 stories. Got some of my weird art on the cover. And just some stories that I had kicking around. So I polished them up and put them in a book. And I'll read this short one called Cougar. Since I now live in Asheville part-time and hiking in the mountains, we have to have bear awareness and cougar awareness. They take you from behind, stun, then quick kill with a neck bite. That's what the Blue Ridge Hiker article said. Bears are different. You might come up on one or spot one, dangerous if you're too close or there are cubs, but they don't stalk. The behind part is what worries Cindy. She's alone, hiking a tough trail, jogging the straighter stretches, but not this part, a hard climb through a boulder slope. Terrain that could easily hide a cougar or cougars. She's wary, scanning each new vista, surveying each plateau she clambers up to, and checking to the side too, behind the big boulders as she passes them. But she can't watch her own back where she's vulnerable. Like life, it's not what you can expect, watch out for, plan to deal with. It's what sneaks up behind that snags you. Getting sick, for example. You eat well, exercise, sleep 7 hours, meditate to relieve stress, but then one morning your throat is rough and 12 hours later you're a snot spigot. Your bod has been taken over. Or money. You plan your budget, expenses, live within your means, but sure enough, there's the unexpected attack from behind. Car repairs, rent increase, inflation, and that quality stock you bought, oops, it crashed. And love, never what you planned for. Cindy stops for a water bottle swig, drops her backpack, stretches, reaches, rolls her shoulders. She's made it to the high fields above the tree line, the ridge trail to Shining Rock. Mid-morning and the dew has evaporated, wildflowers turning their eager heads toward the sun. What a place, strand layers of multi-hued mountain ranges as far as she can see, ribbons of fog still in the valleys, distant shadows pattern knobs and ridges. The sky is pale at the horizon, blending with the hazy mountains, but a pure, rich blue above. She takes a full breath and another. She knows the trail ahead along the ridges through low scrub brush, brambly and thick in patches, enough to hide a crouching cougar. The ones that attack are usually male, the article said, young, hungry males. She hadn't wanted another relationship, not after the last one, but this guy, Alphonse, he snuck up behind her at the art reception. I want to know you, he said in a mock spooky voice right behind her head. When she turned around, his long, fine face was contorted and the worst Dracula imitation ever, and she had to laugh, had to like him. And now, 5 months in, other concerns are hovering behind her. Why does he always need a joint or a drink when they're together? Why are his grand plans for music and art and business ventures always just that, plans? And why does he have no interest in her family or childhood? All extraneous, he says, including his own background. What's he hiding? Who is he really? You never ask questions like that heading in when the light is pulling you along. More water swigs, stretches, head rolls. Ahead, 4 miles to Shining Rock, then the return. Cindy tried to find a hiking buddy, asked around, even called the hiking club. No, not that day. Sorry, can't. So she just went. A little dangerous, probably not wise, but what the heck, here she is. How would it be? A sudden crashing blow, your wind knocked out, your head flashing with pain? Or would you have time to react before the pain hit? You'd be flattened for sure. The big cat straddled over you, snarling as it sank its beautiful teeth into your neck, giving you its full odor and energy. You'd resist, twist, buck your legs, try to punch its nose or gouge its eye. But the cougar has every advantage. We're clumsy, weak animals, unable to run fast or leap, upright, thin-limbed, lacking strong jaw and fangs. One spine snapping bite, lights out. The article said that bigger, stronger Western species cougars are moving this way, hungry for turf and prey. What age human would they prefer to eat, male or female? Would you still be alive when one ripped off, say, a chunk of thigh? Destiny. Cindy thinks about it now and then. Why are we here? God's plan, she was taught in Methodist Sunday school. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. But now the earth is overrun with 7 billion of us. Let your light so shine. But who will see it? And what difference would it make? Her meditation teacher talks about enlightenment, karma. Destiny is personal and individual, how you play out. You could have a wonderful life, or you could get eaten. The cougar's karma might be to consume your karma. Cindy is 36, not old, but not young either. Sometimes her age seems to wind tight around her. What has she got to show for that costly education? Parents who poured love into her, years of therapy, piles of books read, a pretty good job, a pretty good apartment, pretty good friends, but none who'd hike with her this morning. Nothing to be proud of, nothing to sacrifice for, a head full of nothing, a good body that's sure to decline. Guess I flunked God's plan, she says out loud to an audience of morning glories and purple thistle. They wink at her. The sun behind her warms her neck and shoulders. Ah, well, her dad used to say, might as well keep on keeping on. Hope for something hopeful. Who knows, enlightenment and God's plan, and even a happy surprise might sneak up behind you. If you don't find it, it might find you. She extends her arms, hands, fingers out toward the distant grand vista, as if giving a blessing and receiving one. Back on the trail. As for the cougar, if he wants me, he can have me. Not a bad way to die, considering then I'd be a part of him. That's it.
Thanks, Tobias. All right, so we're going to open it up for Q&A. And I see the first one comes to Lisa. So Bill Epps, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Lisa your question?
While I'm writing my question for Tobias, yes. Lisa, wondered how you feel today, given your experience in relationship with the expression, fake it till you make it. How do you feel about that today?
Two ways, actually. I think that sometimes that works, but I also think it only works if you realize that's what you're doing. And I think that fake it till you make it is a hip sort of saying that evolved then in those gravy 80s to disguise courage and bravery.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And the next one is also yours, Bill, for Donna.
And yeah, I don't mean to dominate here, but these are wonderful books and wonderful things to say. Donna, I had a question. You're putting a key at the end of your book really excited me. I remember John Updike did that for his book, The Centaur, which was a very moving tribute to a teacher. And his wife actually suggested that at the end of the book, he put a key in for those who didn't understand the mythology that was shaping the book. And so I thought, oh my gosh, Donna's doing the same thing. I wonder who's responded well among your readership to having that key there. Are people who know the Canterbury Tales, or people who have never read the Canterbury Tales? And any surprises there?
There we go. I actually put the key in during the writing process. I had 4 different readers, and they were struggling a little bit giving me feedback. And so it occurred to me that I should make this key to the tales, and it was just magic. It really helped them out. The people who respond the best are truly the people who are not familiar, but the people who are familiar appreciate, it gives them a little more insight. I know that one person who bought the book really liked what I did with the Merchant's Tale, and so she was commenting on the key and the correlation there.
Okay, right. So Bill, you're full of questions. The next one's for me.
I'm just, really a shout out to everybody. This is a great kind of forum. I hadn't been to one before. I hope it continues. Maybe one day I can bring a book here, but it's not there yet. So yeah, my next question was for Priscilla. You brought up this idea of voices, a grandmother's voice and others. And I'm wondering whether your advice, given your yoga practice and the wisdom you've derived from it, do you bring those voices into dialogue? How has it worked in your experience for you? How's the book helped you balance voices?
So let me clarify, in conversation, in other words, if I'm having a conversation with another person, that I would say, listen, I'm having two different thoughts.
You were
how I should respond, or
you were referring to a grandmother's voice in your head.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether your personal conversation within yourself, not with another, but.
I got you. Okay. Yes. In fact, there's another essay that I write called The Path of Least Resistance. And that's where I bring these two voices in, especially as I age now, having practiced yoga for quite a while. And those of you who have any kind of a physical practice at all, I'm sure you know what I mean by the fact that we begin to practice differently. And so I'll get on the mat and I will often think to myself, oh, I just don't really want to be here. I'm not feeling like I think I'm just going to lie in Shavasana most of the time, or I'm going to opt out of any down dog. And so that's the grandmother's voice saying, oh, don't worry, you just sit down, have a cup of tea, be gentle with yourself. And then there are other times when I say, listen, if I don't do down dogs and planks, and if I don't push myself, I'm not going to keep that flexibility and that strength and build bone strength, which is so important as we age. And so I'm just much more cognizant of that. And on those days when I really do want to pull back and be more gentle, at least I'm noticing it now. I'm not judging myself and saying, oh, you're a wuss. And it's interesting too, I often find that very often I get on the mat and I think I'm going to do a much more gentle practice. Those are the practices where I actually engage more, and I am stronger and I do sort of push through. But I also look at the path of least resistance in my own life and how I've often chosen the path of least resistance. I mean, I went through a master's degree and never took an advanced math class past geometry in 10th grade. I just never, except for educational statistics, I always chose the quote easier courses, more experimental courses. So I really explore that. Is it always wise to choose the path of least resistance, and when it's not, how do we push ourselves without judging ourselves? So it's helped me a lot. Yeah. All right. So let's see. And let's see. Question for Tobias. Bill Epps. Question for Tobias.
Yeah. So Tobias, my question was, how do you decide when your stories are going to preach? You're a preacher. How do you decide when those stories preach and when they're better collected in a collection of stories?
It's an interesting question because fiction writing and preaching are totally different. And when I started fiction writing years ago, I had to unlearn a lot of things, such as happy endings, which you probably know about, Bill, being a preacher yourself. People want answers, they want happiness, they want solutions and ways through the darkness. In fiction writing, the intent is totally different. It's not to lead people anywhere except up to the edge of mystery, to open up the door of mystery, to show them something that raises a question or intrigues them or draws them into some possible realization, but not to prescribe that. So they're two totally different disciplines, and the language is different too. As you know, in preaching, you don't really work in complete sentences or segues, transitions. You don't worry about syntax. It's really just phrases and word pictures strung together and thrown out in an order that has a stream of consciousness effect of either painting a picture that people can latch onto. Jesus told parables, or giving them truisms or maxims, something that they can take home, points 1, 2, 3. So it's a very interesting question. Thanks, Bill.
I also just wanted to point out to you all that up at the top of the chat box, you'll find links to several of the books, the Amazon links. So if you wanted to order them, Tobias, I'm not sure if yours is there. I'll pull it up for you now in the Amazon. So if you wanted to order any of them, you could just click on that link. It'll take you directly to the Amazon page. So any additional questions before we are almost out of time here? And I don't see your book on Amazon, Tobias.
It's
Wait a
because
minute,
I'm
I
not,
just found it. I just found it. So I'll pop that in the chat box as well.
yeah, well, I'm not really selling them. I just give them away.
A true Unitarian.
Yeah, well, people can give me $5 to cover the cost of printing if they want, but otherwise I just give them away.
All right. Okay, well, thank you all very much for being a part of our program. And again, thank you to Simon for 10 years worth of work on the forum. We appreciate all your efforts. And see you all in church.
Thank you all, everybody. Next week, we've got Professor Jen Wright from the Psychology and Philosophy departments at the College of Charleston, and she's going to be doing a Green Sanctuary forum on the controversy over Gadsden Green right here in Charleston. So folks who are interested in environmental justice need to be there for that one.
And isn't there also a field trip to Gadsden Green at some point to look at it?
Laura, do you want to comment on that?
Or maybe that was the creek over there by West Edge.
Exactly. Gadsden Creek is next to Gadsden Green, the housing development, and Dave Rueff is heading that up. And that will be the same afternoon at 3, led by Cyrus Buffum of the Waterkeepers.
Right. Okay.
And we're trying to get Cyrus to do a forum for us on April the 18th, which is also the Sunday closest to Earth Day, I think. So that should be really good.
Great. And
Thank you very much.
anybody has questions about self-publishing, feel free to reach out to the 4 of us. We've got some expertise and pitfalls to avoid. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Priscilla and
you.
Simon.
Thanks,
Thank
folks.
you so much.
You, all of you.